Welcome to the Doomscroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Hanna Belinsky, and my co-host for this week, Joey Chou, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Hanna Belinsky, and this week we're tackling U.S. President Donald Trump's semiconductor tariffs, how Taiwan may or may not benefit from that, and the deal Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has managed to strike between the United States and China. And if we have any extra time today, we'll talk a bit about Joey's second home, Canada, which is currently battling hundreds of wildfires that are burning out of control. Now, I'm sure you've probably talked tariff drama on your own show, Beyond the Reef, which airs during the slot just before ours on Mondays. So anyone listening today is getting the maximum dose of Joey. But I can't not discuss this with you since it's among the biggest news stories domestically these past couple of weeks. Plus, you studied economics, so you know this stuff. It would be stupid of me not to jump on the chance to pick your brain about it. It would be like having the guys from Jersey Shore on and not talking about Jim Tan laundry. Very millennial reference. Sorry, everyone. I'm curious, actually, why did you study econ to begin with?
I did not want to, trust me. I wanted to, I think the exact words was, Dad, I want to go to Milan and study interior designing.
Really?
And he said flat out, no, I don't have the money for that, and study something useful. I think that's what he said.
You know, it occurred to me, I was like, I bet the answer will be like, I had to do the good Asian son thing. And that turned out to be the case.
I did not master playing the piano, so this was my contribution to being a good Asian kid.
It's ironic that he steered you away from that because my dad steered me away from law school, telling me I would hate it, but he was right.
Yes.
Because I worked as a paralegal for a while before this gig, and I would have hated being a lawyer.
You know, okay, so I'm already at a very young age for my kids. They're nearly 3 now, and I'm starting to notice certain proclivities about like their personalities, and I'm telling my wife now that, hey, I think Kai would be good for this. We could direct him towards these things, and Ray would be good for that. And I think my wife has some sort of childhood trauma of her parents having too much of a say about what she can or cannot do. So she's basically she gets really agitated and say, we don't want to say for sure what our kids can or cannot do. But for me as a dad, like, you know what your kids would probably be good at doing.
Sure.
And kids between the age of now to, say, 18, they don't really always know themselves as well as you who's watched them as an adult growing up would.
I think it's okay to direct a little bit. Although I also understand, like, the free reign approach, but I feel like it's okay to be like, hey, why don't you try this?
Like a little nudge.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump right into it. Taiwan has, along with the rest of the world, been on quite the roller coaster ride when it comes to United States President Donald Trump's tariff shenanigans. Amanda and I have definitely talked about it before on the show, and honestly, it's hard to get the timing right on recording the episodes when we do talk about it because the situation has a tendency to change on a dime. Just last week, in the newsroom, we were writing about Taiwan's stock market taking a hit after Trump made some offhand claim in an interview with CNBC about how TSMC, that's Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, is investing $300 billion in the U.S. A 2.7% drop was promptly observed in Taiwan's stock market. Just a day later, though, the market rallied following the 100% tariff he then proposed on foreign-made semiconductors. TSMC has a U.S. semiconductor plant, and they're trying to build more, therefore exempting them from this tariff. All this from our own reporting here at RTI, as well as Charlotte Lee reporting for Taiwan News. My question for you, Joey, is, are you sweating this very much? Because when I see news about Trump's tariffs on Taiwan, I get a little bit nervous, but that's mostly because I don't really understand this mythical thing we call the market. So how does someone with some actual knowledge or expertise view the situation?
Oh gosh, please don't use the E word on me.
Okay, knowledge.
I actually just did a show on this, so I did do some research, and you're right, everything seems to change so quickly, especially with Trump's occasional tirade on media platforms. So Yeah, he's been back and forth, and Taiwan has been riding the Trump waves in and out of danger and market risks. Honestly, I don't think anyone really can foresee what happens in the market during a Trump era.
Yeah.
But I think the big picture is that with tariffs, you're eventually going to see sort of reshuffling of how business is being done worldwide.
Okay.
And TSMC, of course, we've invested a lot. I've heard experts speaking about this on both sides. And I think generally the consensus is that it's difficult for Taiwan to try to make a deal with the U.S. However, given that TSMC takes up a huge market share in Taiwan's TAIEX exchange, that anything happening to them will, like you said, anything Trump says might make a 1.6 or 2 to 3% change in the market exchange here in Taiwan. So I think the experts agree that whatever the trade deal negotiations really come down to be, the Taiwanese government will likely have to make some sort of private sector collaboration with the U.S. Like basically working with the TSMC or who you might be talking about soon, Jensen Huang, to make a deal with the U.S.
Makes sense. When you were talking about how chaotic it is, even for somebody who knows about this stuff, or at least knows more than me, in my research, I was looking up articles like from think tanks and, people who presumably study this, watch this closely. And I got the sense, even from reading those people's writing, that nobody really knows what to expect. Even the pros are they just speculate using knowledgeable terminology. That's the difference between me and them.
Although I have to say that looking from the outside in at what the Trump administration is doing with the tariff stuff, a lot of people moan and groan about it and think that this is all just off-the-cuff nonsense. But I recently saw some data, and I'm not sure if this is 100% correct when I recite it, but I think the amount of tariff income that the U.S. Treasury is about to make at the end of this year is somewhat equal to the entire amount of tax that they can get from all the businesses in the United States. So it's a large volume of income. So it's not nothing, basically.
I see.
And so the Trump administration is doing something. Like they seem to know what they're doing in some sense.
Really? Because either I hear they don't know what they're doing, or I hear his most loyal people singing his praises, but they don't actually know what he's doing either.
Right.
So that's interesting. I may have to look into that further. One thing about it, though, the entire fact that Taiwan's exemption from the tariff hinges on the construction of semiconductor chip fabrication plants in the United States kind of makes me balk. Something I've often come across in my doom scrolling on the subject are various netizens who talk about how Americans lack the kind of work ethic that's required to run a semiconductor chip fab plant the same way Taiwanese people do. And there is a pretty big difference, culturally speaking, between the way American people and Asian people do work-life balance. And that is, for a lot of Asian people, there is no work-life balance, only work. Add to that the exorbitant costs of construction and operation, and it makes me wonder if the chip fabs in the U.S. are ultimately just going to be a big waste of money. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Well, maybe it's not exactly financially efficient, but when you throw enough money at it, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of output that's positive. I've heard, this is a friend of mine, and I've also interviewed him for my show previously. He was actually working in Taiwan and was recruited to work at the TSMC fab in Arizona.
Really?
Yeah, to set things up. And he's an American. He was actually a retired engineer from the Air Force.
Okay.
And so he was saying that it's not just the work ethics, even though that's a big deal because Taiwanese engineers work very hard.
Yes.
They sacrifice their livers for not a small amount of annual salary.
Bleak.
But it's also about the ecosystem that TSMC's and any other semiconductor manufacturers here in Taiwan, their success comes out of that whole ecosystem that's able to build fabs really quickly. There is a certain standard of operation that people are familiar with, and there's not a whole lot of communication that needs to happen between the fab builders and the
Okay.
actual manufacturers who make these chips.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really easy to set up fabs here in Taiwan. Without this ecosystem, they're running into a lot of bottlenecks in the States. But I think that's starting to get resolved slowly. It's just not as efficiently as here in Taiwan.
I guess they have to build that whole infrastructure from the ground up.
Right.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So, going further on the subject of tariffs, Joey just wrote an article for us earlier this week about how Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang made what people in the industry probably would refer to as a baller move. Or I would if I was in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
Behind the scenes of all the tariff drama we were just talking about, he brokered a chip deal between the US and China that has made things a little bit easier on everyone. Back in April, he went to a dinner at Mar-a-Lago where he managed to persuade Trump that selling chips to China wouldn't compromise US national security and pledging to invest $500 billion in AI plants and supercomputing facilities in the US. Last week, Trump asked that the 20% of H-20 artificial intelligence chip sales revenue from China go to the federal government, and old boy Jensen countered with 15%. China responded magnanimously as well, lifting restrictions on some U.S. software companies and suspending a regulatory action they had against Nvidia. Okay, the cynic in me is immediately like, he's clearly just acting on behalf of his company, his bottom line. It just so happens that it was also a good move diplomatically, but it must be said that not every CEO, in fact, a lot of CEOs, are not anywhere near smart enough to pull something like this off. What do you make of Jensen's baller move?
It is a baller move. I celebrate him for it because, well, he is Taiwanese American.
Yeah.
Right? So we're kind of proud of him for it. And speaking on work-life balance, I have listened to a lot of Jensen Huang interviews, and he talks a lot about working hard and how if he could do it again, he wouldn't choose to be the CEO of Nvidia because it is a pretty rigorous working lifestyle.
He sold his soul.
He sold his soul, and that's very Taiwanese. So I can definitely get behind that. At the same time, he has that diplomatic gene, like as opposed to, I guess, the other guy who recently, placated to Trump's favoritism. So, yeah, I would say.
Are you
well
talking
done.
about the Intel guy?
I'm talking about Musk.
Ah.
But I
that
do fear. There's a picture, if you look at any of Jensen Huang's interaction with Trump lately, there's a picture of him standing at a podium in the White House with
I saw
Trump
that.
right next to him. And Trump did that very, Trump like tilting his head, sulking kind of thing, like, hey, why don't I have the spotlight kind of thing? And that reminds me of how he was with Elon Musk at the beginning of their relationship. So I do fear, what if they have a falling out just like Trump did with Elon Musk? But for now, everything seems to be working.
I don't think it would be the same, though. The dynamic seems different because I get the sense that Jensen is not ego-driven like Trump, or if he is, he can keep it in check.
Yeah.
And he is just seeing an opportunity and taking it.
Yeah.
I think I get more of that feeling from him, but I don't know. He could be smarter than me. Maybe he's put one over on me. I really couldn't say.
Well, even if he is, at least he's got more stable hands.
Sure.
And I think even if there were evil in the world, as long as it doesn't cause imbalance.
As long as he doesn't hit the button.
Yeah, exactly. Like, chaos is never good. And so at least for the short term, Jensen brokered a deal where it is still possible for chip makers to work with the U.S. and sell maybe chips to China. And then there's also, since we're talking about TSMC, after this bit of news, TSMC's market share plummeted because of what people are now speculating that, hey, if TSMC also has to pay 15% to the U.S. Treasury, that could really eat into their margin.
Oh,
so
dear.
That's fluctuating too.
Every other day, the news is like, market go up, market go down.
Yeah.
TSMC go up, TSMC go down. And TSMC is such a huge part of Taiwan's domestic market that it often dictates how the whole thing seems to perform on a given day. Did you manage to buy any stocks while they were low?
I don't dare buy any tech stocks.
Too volatile.
Not at all. Yeah, exactly. I usually go for like very safe like financial
That's
stocks.
good. That's what my father-in-law does.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to learn more about it. So we were just visiting them in the United States last month. And we were kind of trying to pick his brain about it. Like, how do we do stocks? How does this work?
Yeah.
And that was just his answer was just like, you just go with the most stable, most unchanging thing. And that's it. Don't mess around with anything that's going to go up and down.
Yeah, they tend to like the phrase dollar averaging, which is you just put a little bit in it every week, every month, and don't think about it. Because in the long run, you're really just saving to beat inflation. You're not trying to make $1 million all at once.
I feel a little depressed and uneasy when I read about semiconductor chips, as if that's the only thing Taiwan's got going for it. Realistically, though, that is kind of the thing, the major bargaining chip, as it were, that we have. I can't help feeling like our survival depends upon it, though. Do you think there's any way that Taiwan can diversify what we have to offer when it comes to the global supply chain?
I feel like Taiwan's always been in that position where there will be one industry that does well for a couple of decades, and then it would be the next. I don't feel like Taiwan has ever really diversified across the board to any meaningful proportion, So maybe in the 70s it was textile, and then it was, like
big software boom, right?
Yeah. And then the bicycle parts, So a lot of our development comes from government-sponsored R&D programs. And going back to that TSMC ecosystem, like the government did a lot to set up that system and to build the talent pool for it. So to diversify out of making semiconductor chips, that really depends on where the government takes us.
I guess there's no hope for pineapple cakes taking over the world.
There's no, well, maybe.
Bubble tea. This phrase soft power?
Yeah.
Korea got it figured out. They have their little sweatshop where they crank out these idols who are then, extremely mentally unwell and probably physically unwell. And then you have Japan, who has done similarly with anime and other cultural offerings that put it on the map. Why don't we have something like that?
I find that Taiwan doesn't yet see the benefit of having a consistent branding for certain things. K-pop, for example, you said, it's government sponsored, right? It definitely is. Like that's the only pop industry where people who are supposed to go to the military can have it easy. And, those boy bands can basically go and just spend a couple of years making music while they're still serving the military. And so they get a lot of perks for it.
They do that?
Of course, yeah. They
say
they go to the military, but they have a different... They don't actually do I'm sure they don't do exactly what the other servicemen do. And then there is the Japanese electronics industry, which has been they built it up from years of branding. And I feel like Taiwan doesn't have the branding. TSMC is not exactly a final product. Like it's not a downstream product brand. So if we could figure that out, then that'll be the day. But until then, even with bubble tea, right? You talk about bubble tea from Taiwan, that's one of our greatest soft power exports, but you don't know a Taiwanese brand of bubble tea that's world famous.
That's true. I will say we have Din Tai Fung.
Yes.
Din Tai Fung is doing really, really, really well in the United States and in North America and just, I think, globally. But I know in the U.S. specifically, they're making bank. I think they are the highest earning restaurant chain in the U.S. as of this last, I guess, fiscal quarter. I wrote about this just recently. They're doing super well. So there is that. But yeah, the boba tea, I have not ever had a good boba tea in the U.S. and they're always like $6, $7, $8. And it's just like, what is the point? I would rather buy a ticket, come home and drink it.
Yeah, exactly. I can see that Din Tai Fung's making bank because it's the same ingredients, so the cost remains the same. But my friends all say they sell it for 3 to 4 times as much in the U.S. or Canada.
Actually, the restaurants are mobbed. You cannot get in without a reservation, which I guess is kind of true here. You tend to have to wait in a long line to get into Din Tai Fung here, but in the U.S. where people want what they want right away, right now, It's kind of amazing that a restaurant like that can get off the ground and be that successful.
Hey, now that you mentioned that, I think another big problem that Taiwan has is for a restaurant like Din Tai Fung and for a company like TSMC, they're free to make these deals with foreign government whenever they want. And the Taiwanese government doesn't have a say in it.
Really?
And that, well, I mean,
We're talking free
looking
market?
from the outside in, yeah, maybe Taiwan celebrates free market too much where we don't control our own businesses as much. And I can't imagine that happening to like Samsung.
Yeah.
The Korean government would never allow the Samsung to make a backroom deal with the U.S. government without their saying so.
That's an interesting point. Shall we extend the hand of authoritarianism over Din Tai Fung?
Well, I don't know. I think we enjoy Taiwan being free and, an open democracy.
Yeah, let's keep doing that, please. Don't take anything I say seriously, please. Thank you. Let's pivot away from tariffs and chips for a bit. Just the other day, my mother was telling me over the phone that the air quality where my parents are currently located was really bad, and they haven't been able to do their usual daily walk. Old people and their little daily walk. This is because there's a bunch of smoke from the wildfires burning in Canada right now billowing over. And this isn't the first time this has happened, but I tend to pay attention to climate change-related events in general, and I know that you spent several years living and going to school in Canada, where there are no earthquakes, no typhoons, but we're always at the mercy of nature one way or another, so you've got wildfires. Unlike earthquakes, though, we are implicated in the occurrence of wildfires. Per Olivia Bowden, writing for The Guardian, most of the current fires are connected to warmer than average temperatures, drought conditions, decreased levels of snowpack, and low soil moisture, all of which are driven by global heating. Did you learn anything while you were living in Canada about what you're supposed to do about wildfires?
No.
No?
Not at all.
Where were you? Sorry.
This wasn't a problem when I was there.
Really?
That's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember I was first in British Columbia when I was in high school, so that's on the West End, which had wildfire about 2 years ago. And then this time was on the East End, where it's closer to Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And I never went to those places, but they weren't a problem when I was studying there. So I never learned how to run away from wildfire.
Sure.
I do know that if there is ever a forest fire, you're supposed to run towards the side that's been burnt. Because
it won't go back. It won't go backwards, presumably, right? I can't imagine, because I've never been anywhere either where wildfires are a concern, although we are often seeing in the news about California burning and things of that nature. Yeah. Where did you go to school?
I went to Ontario for school.
Okay.
University of Ottawa.
Okay. I don't want to make you say when it was, because, that'll date you.
2008 was the year I graduated, I think.
Recession year.
Yes.
That's just great.
Yes. I didn't even know there was recession. That's how oblivious I was to the
oblivious to wildfires, oblivious to the recession,
I've
just
had a
fresh
good life.
off partying. Man, that's nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for today's news report. A quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Hanna Belinsky.
I'm Joey Chou.
Thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. We'll see you next week.